The United Galactic Federation prided itself on three things: bureaucratic efficiency, a delusion, diplomatic tact, amiracle, and military preparedness, an actual accomplishment. The Federation's crown jewel of military education, the Interstellar Defense Academy, hung in orbit around the perfectly temperate, utterly predictable planet of Harmonio 4, a fitting location given that 97% of sentient species in the known galaxy evolved on worlds that could be described with words like moderate balanced and completely lacking in anything that might regularly try to devour you. Humanity, as it turned out, belonged to the other 3% Earth, or terra incognita, as it was unofficially logged, in xenobiological databases, had produced a species that considered only slightly poisonous to be a selling point for recreational consumables and viewed certain death as more of a challenge than a deterrent. The planet itself seemed to have a personal vendetta against its inhabitants, featuring everything from microscopic pathogens to macroscopic predators, all apparently competing in some cosmic contest to determine which could most efficiently eliminate human life. They failed. Obviously, humans not only survived but thrived, and then, to the collective existential horror of the galactic community, they started showing up else, where the Academy had accepted humans into its ranks with the same enthusiasm one might display when discovering a particularly venomous spider has taken residence in one's undergarments, which is to say, with extreme reluctance, and the constant awareness that sudden movements might end badly for everyone involved. Lieutenant Machan, the Valerian drill instructor, surveyed the freshly arrived cadets with 4 sets of compound eyes, each independently rotating to take in different angles of the sorry lot. Valerians evolved from hive-dwelling arthropoids and possessed exoskeletons that shimmered with iridescent blues and purples. They were known for their exceptional tactical minds and complete inability to understand the concept of sarcasm. Welcome, cadets, to what will either be the most formative experience of your lives or the most humiliating. McShern announced, mandibles clicking in what passed for smug satisfaction. I see we have representatives from 17 different worlds, including all sets of eyes, suddenly converged on a single point. Like targeting systems locking onto a threat, a death welder. The human cadet stood at parade rest face, impressively neutral, despite being the sudden focus of not just the instructor, but every other being in the docking bay. Most aliens unconsciously shifted a few steps away, creating a perfect circle of space around her. The human was of average height for her species, which meant she towered over half the cadets and could look directly in the eyes of the other half. Her muscular frame, even at rest, seemed coiled with potential energy that made nearby cadets instinctively calculate escape vectors. Cadet Reyes reporting as, "Ordered, sir." She responded, voice clear and controlled. "Ah, yes, the human," Machan said, making it sound like an unfortunate medical condition. "You've been assigned to Echo Squad. Try not to accidentally kill your squad mates with your enthusiastic presence." The boss. Cadets tittered nervously, except for the Zenturi, who expressed amusement by releasing pheromones that made everyone within 5 miles feel slightly dizzy. "I'll do my best to restrain my homicidal Deathworld tendencies, sir," Reyes replied, her face still a masterpiece of neutrality, while her tone carried just enough edge to make the instructor's antenna twitch in confusion, and thus began Cadet Ryer's career at the Academy, representing a species that most of the galaxy viewed as walking disaster zones with inexplicably charming smiles. Echo Squad consisted of 7 cadets from across the galaxy. There was Trill, a Floraxian whose photosynthetic skin glowed softly in various hues depending on their mood. Xenomethane. Breathing Koran, whose environmental suit made them look like a walking deep-sea exploration vessel. The twins Kai and Lom, identical Peridians, with telepathic capabilities that worked on everyone except frustratingly humans. Vixaferd Centauri, whose ancestors had evolved as arboreal ambush predators, but who had since devoted their species' impressive stalking abilities primarily to Commerce Drava silicon-based Chronite, whose body made soft clinking sounds when they moved quickly and Reyes. The human their shared dormitory resembled a habitat display at a particularly ambitious zoo, with each section carefully calibrated for the occupants. Biological needs, Raya's section was notable for its lack of special accommodations beyond a slightly higher gravity setting, a fact that made her squad mates both envious and unnerved. "Is it true?" Tyrell asked. During their first meal together, skin pulsing with curious yellow, that humans deliberately consume capsaicin compounds for pleasure, the Floraxians. Translator rendered their speech into standard with a melodic quality like someone speaking through wind chimes. Reyes paused mid-bite. The Academy's attempt at recreating Earth cuisine, a sad approximation of a burrito held forgotten in her hand. "Yes, though some of us have higher tolerances than others. But it's a defense chemical." Zank interjected, their voice emerging from their suit speakers with a slight metallic tinge. "It evolved specifically to cause pain to mammals." True Reyes nodded, then took a deliberate bite, but pain can be interesting, especially when it's controlled. The twins exchanged a glance that communicated volumes in the way only telepaths could. Death. Worlders Kai or possibly Loam telling them apart was nearly impossible, muttered as if that explained everything. "You realize we're sitting right here," Reyes pointed out dryly. "Exactly our point." The other twin replied, "Any species that evolved alongside active volcanoes, carnivorous megapora, and microscopic entities that regularly attempt planetary genocide, you mean bacteria, and then casually sits at a dining table discussing the recreational consumption of chemical weapons, clearly operates on a different set of survival parameters." Vix, who had been silently observing with the practiced patience of a born stalker, finally spoke up. "What I want to know is whether the stories about human endurance are true. Can you really continue functioning after sustaining injuries that would incapacitate most species?" Reyes considered this define functioning, maintaining consciousness, continuing to move, fighting back. Vix clarified, whiskers twitching with poorly concealed fascination. "Depends on the injury, but generally, yes. Adrenaline is a hell of a drug. Our bodies sort of override the shutdown protocols when they determine that immediate action is more important than damage control." Reyes shrugged, as if describing a minor software update rather than an evolutionary trait that made xenobiologists wake up screaming, "And this is normal for your species?" Dravasked their crystalline structure, refracting the light as they leaned forward with interest. "As normal as anything else," Reyes replied, finishing her burrito with a disappointed frown. The Academy's culinary AI still couldn't quite nail the concept of spicy. Later that night, after lights out, Trill's voice drifted softly through the darkened dormitory. "I heard humans sleep with their eyes closed, completely vulnerable to predators. Is that true?" "Yes," came Raya's voice from her bunk. "Though we tend to wake up if something threatens us." "But how would you know?" Zen asked. "If your primary sensory organs are offline?" There was a pause, then Reyes replied, matter-of-factly, "We just do. It's called instinct." The dormitory fell silent as 6 alien cadets contemplated the implications of a species that could detect danger, even while effectively comes for a third of their life cycle. The human, meanwhile, fell asleep within minutes, her soft, rhythmic breathing a reminder that the most dangerous predator in the room was currently defenseless. In theory, the Academy's training regimen was designed to be universally challenging, which meant it contained elements that were torturous for some species and trivial for others. Water-bee-breathing Aquarians breezed through the underwater navigation courses that left land-dwelling species gasping, and traumatized low-gravity species dominated the aerial maneuvers that made high-gravity worlders like Reyes feel like they were piloting their bodies through mollies. But then there were the endurance trials. 5 more minutes. Bark, Lieutenant Mechanist Squad, held position in the environmental chamber, currently simulating the desert conditions of Novus. 3. The temperature had been steadily rising for the past hour, now hovering around 40 degrees C, with humidity levels approaching 0. Trill had already collapsed, their photosynthetic processes struggling in the extreme heat. The twins looked barely conscious. supporting each other as sweat poured down their faces. Zen was fine in their environmental suit. Though the suit's cooling systems were audibly straining, Drav, being silicon-based, actually enjoyed the heat. Vix was panting heavily, their fur providing unwanted insulation. And then there was Reyes standing at attention, face flushed, but otherwise showing minimal distress. 3 minutes, this is nothing, Reyes murmured to Vix, who looked on the verge of collapse. Summer in Arizona makes this feel like a pleasant spring day. Your planet is hell, Vix managed between pants. Nah. Hell would have more humidity, Reyes replied conversationally. This is just uncomfortable. When the chamber finally powered down, the non-human members of Echo Squad dragged themselves toward the exit, while Reyes helped support Trill, whose normally vibrant skin had dulled to a concerning shade of beige. Nice work, Death Welder, Lieutenant McCann commented as they passed mandibles clicking in what might have been respect. Perhaps Earth's environmental sadism has its advantages. Just another Tuesday at home, sir, Reyes replied, earning a confused twitch of the Valerian's antenna. The concept of weekdays was apparently not universal. As the first training cycle progressed, a pattern merged. Rez struggled with the fine xenolinguistic nuances that the twins mastered effortlessly. She lacked the natural camouflage abilities that made Vix nearly invisible during stealth exercises, her sense of spatial awareness. Zerog couldn't compare to Zen's methane-adapted brain, but when it came to anything involving physical resilience, pain tolerance, or adapting to hostile environments, the human cadet consistently outperformed her squadmates to a degree that was beginning to earn her reluctant respect. It's not that we're inherently better, Ryeth tried explaining after acing yet another toxic atmosphere drill while her teammates recovered in the medical bay. It's just that our homeworld tried to kill us in so many creative ways that we developed equally creative countermeasures. You evolved on a planet that actively hates you, Kayol pointed out, and instead of sensibly going extinct, your species decided to hate it right back and win. That's actually a pretty accurate summary of human history. Reyes conceded the Academy's wilderness. Survival exercise was the capstone of the first training cycle, a practical test of everything the cadets had learned. Thus, for each squad would be dropped on an uninhabited moon orbiting the gas giant Behemoth with instructions to navigate to an extraction point 50 kilometers away. The moon, designated XB7, was classified as a Class 3 wilderness environment, challenging but not lethal, with no indigenous sentient life and a carefully managed ecosystem of transplanted flora and fauna, or so the briefing claimed. As the dropship descended through XB7's atmosphere, Reyes gazed out the viewport at the landscape below. Dense purple-hued forests covered most of the visible terrain, broken occasionally by clearings and the silvery ribbons of rivers. Beautiful, certainly. But something about the patterns of vegetation triggered an ancestral warning bell in the back of her mind. Pretty, isn't it? Trill commented, their skin shifting to match the purplish hues below. Too pretty. Reyes murmured, those clearings aren't natural. How can you tell? Drav asked, crystalline structure, catching the light as they leaned toward the viewport. They're too regular, perfect circles. Nature doesn't work that way, unless something is creating those patterns deliberately. The twins exchanged their usual telepathic glance. The briefing said, no sentient species. One of them pointed out, sentient doesn't mean intelligent, Reyes replied. And intelligent doesn't always mean technological. Those are territory markers of some kind. Lieutenant McCann's voice cut through their speculations. As the dropship touched down, cadets, gather your equipment and prepare to disembark. You have 72 standard hours to reach the extraction point. Your performance will be monitored, but do not expect rescue unless your life signs indicate imminent death. So comforting, Vix muttered. Whiskers twitching sardonically, the rear hatch opened, with a hydraulic hiss, releasing a wave of humid alien air into the cabin. It smelled of unfamiliar vegetation and something else, something musky and animal that made the hair on the back of Reyes's neck stand up. Echo Squad disembarked with their survival packs, and nav equipment. The dropship wasted no time in taking off again, leaving them alone in a small clearing surrounded by towering purple vegetation that resembled a cross between Earth's bamboo and giant ferns. Nav system indicates. The extraction point is 49.7 kilometers northeast. Zen announced after consulting their equipment, terrain appears to be mostly forested with several water features to navigate. We should establish a marching order. Dira suggested Vix at point for stealth reconnaissance. Twins in the middle for telepathic monitoring. Zen and I following with Trill and the human Atriar guard Rahel frowned. I think I should take point with Vix. Why Drab's crystalline body made a sound like chimes in a mild breeze, their species equivalent. Of a scoff, your stealth capabilities are the least developed in the squad, True Reyes acknowledged, but myth-threat detection might be useful. Threat detection. Kyle, or was it? Lum asked. The briefing said no sentient life, Reyes interrupted. But something made those clearings, and my species evolved alongside apex predators. Sometimes we can sense them before we see them. The squad exchanged glances ranging from skeptical to concerned, typical Deathworld paranoia. Zank's mechanized voice declared, the Academy wouldn't place first-cycle cadets in genuine danger. Right, Vic agreed, though their whiskers twitched uncertainly besides. I'm perfectly capable of detecting potential threats. My species were ambush hunters for millions of years before we discovered stock trading. Reyes didn't argue further, but as they organized their equipment and prepared to move out, she kept her senses hyper-alert, scanning the tree with the focused attention of a species that had evolved knowing it was someone else's dinner the first few hours of. Their trek passed without incident. The forest was alive with sounds, rustling, vegetation calls of unseen creatures, the occasional distant splash from what might have been a river or lake. The purple foliage grew densely enough to limit visibility to about 10 meters in any direction, which put Reyes increasingly on edge. We're being watched, she announced during their first rest break, voice low enough that only Trill resting beside her could hear. How can you tell? The Floraxian skin had taken on mottled patterns that matched the surrounding vegetation, a defense mechanism triggered. By stress or the perception of threat, the forest isn't consistent. Reyes explained there are patterns to how animals behave when larger predators are around. Small noises. Stop temporarily, then resume once the threat has passed. It's been happening, cyclically for the past hour. Perhaps it's just the local equivalent of birds or small mammals, Trill suggested, but their skin had darkened further, betraying their concern. Maybe Reyes conceded. But I'd feel better if we found a more defensible position. To camp for the night cycle, those clearings make us too exposed. When she voiced this concern to the whole squad, she met with mixed reactions. The Deathworld is getting jumpy, Zent commented dismissively. The Academy wouldn't put us in actual danger. I'm not detecting any immediate threats, Vix added, though they had been compulsively grooming their whiskers, a nervous habit that somewhat undermined their confident assertion. The twins had been unusually quiet, occasionally freezing mid-motion as, if listening to something no one else could hear, we're picking up something. One of them finally admitted not thoughts exactly, but presents multiple present. Reyes pressed. We need to be more cautious. Or Ralph countered. We're all getting paranoid. Because someone a pointed look at Reyesha's been seeing threats in every shadow since we landed, they decided to continue as planned. Though Reyes noticed that everyone seemed to be moving with greater vigilance than before, the day cycle began to shine. The purple forest darkening to a deep indigo as the light faded. They reached one of the circular clearings just as visibility was becoming an issue. We should make camp here. Zen suggested good visibility in all directions. No, Reyes said firmly. These clearings aren't safe. They're too exposed to what Drav demanded. The briefing said, forget the damn briefing. Reyes snapped, These clearings are territories marked by something big enough to clear 100-meter circles in dense forest. We'd be setting up camp in someone's dining room and announcing ourselves as the special of the day. An uncomfortable silence followed her outburst, broken only by the increasingly active sounds of the forest at dusk. I agree with the human, Trill finally said, their skin now a deep, worried purple. These clearings feel wrong in the end. They compromised setting. Up camp at the edge of the clearing where the forest provided some cover to their backs, while maintaining visibility in front. Reyes insisted on taking first watch, despite having been awake the longest, a proposal that met no resistance from her. Increasingly nervous squad mates, the night creatures of XB7 were considerably more vocal than their daytime counterparts. Strange calls echoed through the forest. Some distant, others disturbingly close. Most concerning were the periods of complete silence that fell sporadically, lasting several minutes before the normal cacophony resumed. Something's hunting out there, Reyes murmured to herself, as she scanned the darkness beyond their small camp, the words both a warning and a confirmation of what her instincts had been screaming since they landed. It was during one such period of silence, halfway through her watch, that she spotted them reflective eyes glinting at the forest's edge, quickly vanishing when she turned her light toward them. Not just one pair, but several, positioned around the perimeter of the clearing, whatever they were. They were coordinating, working as a pack, and they had Echo Squad surrounded. Reyes woke Vix with her hand gently but firmly over the centaur's muzzle, to prevent any startled sounds. "We're surrounded," she whispered, when she was sure Vix was fully alert. "Pack hunters, at least 5 that I've seen, wake the others quietly." To Vix's credit, they didn't question or hesitate, slipping silently to each sleeping squad mate and rousing them with minimal disturbance. Within minutes, the entire squad was awake and alert, gathered close as Reyes explained the situation. "What do they look like?" Zen asked. "Environmental suit sensors wearing as they attempted to penetrate the darkness? Can't tell yet." Reyes admitted just eyes reflecting light, but they're big coordinated, and they've been shadowing us since we landed where. "Haven't they attacked one of the twins?" asked voice, barely audible. "They're assessing us?" Reyes explained. "Pack predators don't attack immediately unless they're desperate. They observe, look for weaknesses, wait for the right moment, and when is that right moment?" Drav's crystalline body clinked softly, as they shifted nervously. "Where they think they can win without casualties," Reyes replied grimly. "Predator calculus eyes, universal maximum gain for minimum risk. To what do we do?" Trill skin had gone, nearly black with fear, their natural bioluminescence completely suppressed, an adaptive response to avoid detection when need to change the calculation. Rye said, already rummaging through her pack, "Make them think we're more trouble than we're worth." "How exactly do we do that?" Xena demanded. Reyes pulled out her utility knife and standard issue laser cutter. "By convincing them there's an apex predator in our midst, is there?" "Bix?" asked Whiskers, quivering. Reyes met the centaur's gaze steadily. "There's about to be." What followed was a crash course in Deathworld predator psychology, delivered in hurried whispers as Reyes hastily reconfigured their camp's perimeter. Hunters respect hierarchy," she explained, while setting up a series of small perimeter alarms using components cannibalized from their communications equipment. They understand the concept of bigger bad predator. Instinctively we need to trigger that recognition. And how exactly do we do that when we're outnumbered and possibly outmatched? Dravast by being unpredictable and aggressive, Reyes replied, checking the charge on her laser cutter. "No prey species acts aggressive when cornered. They either freeze or flee. Only another predator stands its ground and fights." Back the ice had been, drawing closer during their hasty preparations, the circle tightening as the creatures gained confidence. Finally, one stepped into the dim light cast by their camp's emergency beacon. It was roughly the size of a small earth bear, with 6 muscular limbs ending in wickedly curved claws. Its body was covered in scales that shifted color slightly with each movement. Not quite camouflage, but disruptive enough to make its precise location difficult to track. The head featured multiple eyes arranged, in clusters and a jaw that split 4 ways, revealing rows of serrated teeth. Most disturbing was the obvious intelligence in those eyes. This was no mindless hunter, but a calculating predator with problem-solving capabilities, and it wasn't alone as the first revealed itself. Others emerged from the forest edge 5-7. Eventually 12 creatures in total, forming a loose semicircle around the exposed side of the camp. "Nobody move," Reyes whispered. "They're trying to trigger our flight response once. We run, they'll chase." "What's the alternative?" Zink hissed. "Fighting 12 apex predators with utility knives and a laser cutter rated for cutting branches." "No," Reyes said slowly, rising to her full height. "We changed the dynamic." Before anyone could stop her, she stepped forward toward the semicircle of predators, utility knife in one hand, laser cutter in the other. The lead creature hissed a sound like escaping steam, mixed with a rattlesnake's warning. Reyes hissed back, a perfect mimicry that made her squad mates flinch in surprise. Then she did something that violated every survival instinct of non-predator species. She advanced 3 deliberate, confident steps forward directly toward the largest creature she made. Herself appear bigger arms, spread wide weapons, catching. The light. The clearing fell completely silent as the standoff held for 1 heartbeat. 2-3. The lead predator took a half-step back, confusion evident in its posture. This wasn't how prey behaved. Prey didn't advance when threatened prey didn't. Mimic predator warnings. Prey ran or froze or begged for mercy through submission displays. Whatever this strange furless biped was, it wasn't following the script. "What is she doing?" Trill whispered. Skin flickering with anxiety. "Being human." Vix replied. With newfound respect, the standoff continued for several more seconds before Reyes abruptly charged forward 3 more steps and bellowed a primal, threatening sound that echoed through the clearing. The nearest predators skittered backward in surprise. Then she stopped, assuming a ready stance. Eyes locked with the pack leader in a direct challenge. The creature made a series of clicking sounds to its packmates. Without breaking eye contact with Reyes, the human responded with a low rumbling growl. That seemed to emanate from somewhere primeval in her chest, a sound her squad mates hadn't known humans could make. The pack leader scales rippled with uncertainty. The food wasn't behaving like food. The food was behaving like a bigger, more confident predator. The food was changing the rules of engagement. Suddenly, the creature made a decision. It backed up several steps, issued another series of clicks and whistles to its pack, and then, to the astonishment of everyone except Reyes, turned and loped back into the forest. The others followed, disappearing into the purple underbrush until only the sound of their retreat remained. Echo Squad sat in stunned silence for several seconds before Zen finally spoke. "What just happened?" Raycast turned back, too, her squad mate's adrenaline still coursing through her system, but outwardly calm predator psychology. They were expecting us to act like prey when I didn't. It confused them, made them reassess the risk. No predator willingly engages with another predator of equal or greater threat level unless they're starving or protecting Terry. "But you're not," Drav began. "Not what a predator—" Reyes raised an eyebrow. "Humans are omnivores, with predatory ancestors. We still carry the instincts, the body language, the psychological wiring. Those creatures recognized it even if they've never seen a human before. You bluffed 12 apex predators." One of the twins said, incredulously. "I convinced them the potential cost outweighed the potential benefit," Reyes corrected. "That's all. Predator interaction is resource calculation. They decided we weren't worth the risk. Trill's skin had begun to regain some color. Will they come back? Probably," Rise admitted. "But not tonight. They need to regroup. Reconsider by morning. We should be long gone, I suggest. We move camp now while they're retreating and put some distance between us," as they hastily packed up their equipment. Rise noticed her squad mates looking at her differently, not with the usual mixture of caution and curiosity that humans typically received, but with something new, respect certainly, but also A dawning recognition that the Deathworld Cadet in their midst wasn't just an evolutionary oddity, but the product of a planet that had inadvertently created the perfect universal soldier. They reached the extraction point 12 hours ahead of schedule. Having traveled through the night and the following day with minimal rest, the pack had shadowed them for the first few kilometers, but gradually fell back as Echo Squad maintained a punishing pace that Reyes assured them would communicate strength. Rather than fear, when the Academy's retrieval shuttle touched down, Lieutenant McChan emerged, mandibles twitching with what might have been surprise at finding the squad not only intact, but early report cadets the Valerian ordered as they boarded. The shuttle, they each gave their account, with the twins providing the most detailed explanation, while the others occasionally interjected with their perspectives throughout it all. Reyes remained quiet, letting her squad mates tell the story. And then, the human charged them, Vix concluded with uncharacteristic animation, whiskers practically vibrating with excitement, straight at the pack leader. Made sounds I didn't think a bipedal species could produce, and they retreated a whole pack of apex. Predators just left Lieutenant McCann's compound, eyes all swiveled to focus on Reyes. "Is this accurate, Cadet?" More or less, Sir Rios replied evenly. "I recognized predatory behavior patterns, similar to species from Earth. I applied countermeasures that have proven effective in human-predator interactions." "You mean you terrified them into thinking you were more dangerous than they were?" the lieutenant clarified, mandibles clicking rapidly in what the cadets had learned to recognize as amusement. Reyes allowed herself a small smile. "That's one interpretation, sir. Interesting." The Valerian consulted a data pad because, according to our records, the Kisrath pack hunters of XB7 have never retreated from any species they've encountered before. They're apex predators with no natural enemies until now. Apparently the shuttle fell silent as the implications sank in. Sir Dra finally ventured the briefing, classified XB7 as a Class 3 wilderness environment. Those creatures were at least Class 5 threats. Indeed, they were, Cadet Meccan agreed. Setting aside the data pad, the Academy occasionally adjusts the difficulty parameters of training exercises to test specific qualities in its cadetses. In this case, we were curious how a squad containing a Deather would respond to a genuine threat situation. "You used us as an experiment," Zen accused environmental suit speakers, barely containing their indignation. "We provided you with an opportunity to apply your training in realistic conditions," the lieutenant corrected smoothly, and the results were most illuminating as the shuttle broke atmosphere and accelerated toward the Academy. Reyes gazed out the viewport at the purple world receding below. She thought about the pack hunters with their calculating eyes and adaptive scales, how they'd assessed her squad as potential prey, and how a lifetime of evolutionary programming had been disrupted by the unexpected presence of something their instincts couldn't properly categorize. They weren't wrong to be cautious. She murmured too softly for anyone but Trill beside her to hear. "Humans are technically omnivores, but our history skews heavily toward the predatory end of the spectrum. We're just predators who learn to farm. Is that why your species advanced so quickly compared to others?" Trill asked, skin rippling with curious blue patterns. "Because you combine predatory drive with cooperative social structures." Ryers considered this. Maybe, or maybe it's just that when your planet tries to kill you every day, you get really motivated to develop technologies that let you kill it. Back the Academy appeared through the viewport, its gleaming structures, orbiting the peaceful world of Harmonia 4, a bastion of order in a chaotic universe for the first time. Reyes felt truly at home there, not because it resembled Earth in any way, but because she had found her place not as an oddity, not as a Deathworlder to be cautiously tolerated, but as a cadet who had proven her worth in the most primal way possible. The universe was vast and often hostile, filled with creatures who had evolved in gentler environments than humanity's crucible. But perhaps that crucible had forged something the galaxy needed: a species that stared down apex predators and made them blink first. She was just a cadet from a death world until the Predator pack turned and fled, and in that moment everything changed the next morning as Echo Squad entered the dining hall for breakfast. Conversations hushed briefly before erupting. Into excited whispers, news had spread quickly about their encounter on XB7. Reyes ignored the attention loading her tray with the closest approximation of scrambled eggs the Academy's culinary AI could manage. "You realize you're something of a celebrity. Now," Vix commented as they took their usual table or standing still and making noise. Reyes shook her head. "Any human would have done the same. That's precisely what makes it remarkable," Drav replied, their crystalline structure catching the light. As they gestured emphatically, "What was extraordinary for us is apparently standard operating procedure for your species. The Academy's xenobiologists have requested interview sessions with you," one of the twins added. "Great." Raya smuttered, "More tests. Just what I needed. Consider it a cultural exchange." Trill suggested, their skin flushing with amused pink tones. "They learn about the terrifying Deathworld survival instincts of humans, and you learn how genuinely bizarre your species appears to the rest of us." Reyes laughed, a sound that still made nearby cadets from prey species twitch involuntarily. "Fair enough. Though I maintain that Earth isn't that bad. Once you get used to the constant threat of death, only a human would consider getting used to the constant threat of death to be a reasonable adaptation strategy." Zeng's mechanized voice observed dryly as banter continued around the table. Reyes noticed something different in how her squad mates interacted with her. The careful distance, the subtle weariness that had colored their early relationships had vanished, replaced by something closer to the comfortable camaraderie she'd observed among species with similar evolutionary backgrounds. They had seen her at her most human-facing. Down danger with the unique blend of calculation and primal instinct that had allowed her species to survive a planet seemingly designed to eliminate them. And instead of finding it alarming, they had recognized its value. In a galaxy where most intelligent species had evolved as prey, perhaps there was a place for the predators, after all, not as conquerors or threats, but as protectors, beings who understood danger at its most fundamental level and refused to back down from it. She was just a cadet from a death world, but perhaps that was exactly what the galaxy needed.